Hello, this is Miss Schaefer with NEMS Channel 8. We are reporting live from inside the Constitutional Convention, just on the other side of this door here in Philadelphia, at Independence Hall. Delegates are currently meeting as part of the Constitutional Convention. Now, here's a live look outside at Independence Hall, where delegates have been meeting since May. Now, we have not been able to get inside the convention, very exclusive, but what we do know, it's been a very tense few hours here in Philadelphia, on top of an already tense summer indeed. Today, the delegates are set to put forth an agreement regarding representation of slaves and slavery in the Union, something we all know has been a very, very big point of tension throughout the country for some time. And if you remember back just 12 short years ago to the Declaration of Independence written in 1776, the issue of slavery was intentionally left out of that document because leaders like Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin knew that it had the potential to rip apart the newly found United States before it even got off the ground. A year later, the Articles of Confederation were somehow less pressured to mention or address the issue of slavery at all, because it gave so much power to the states that they could make up their own mind regardless of what the new nation had said. Now, here we are once again, attempting to unite a nation forced to face this ugly institution of slavery, knowing very well that it could rip apart this union at the seams. Now, slavery is not the only issue on the table for this summer. We are being told that taxation is also going to be discussed. We will be back later with some more live coverage at the convention. But first, let's get a closer look at what has already happened at the convention this summer here at Independence Hall. Going into Philadelphia in May, all the delegates of the Constitutional Convention agreed on one thing, that a newer, stronger national government needed to be formed. But that was where the agreement stopped, as the specifics of just how strong the government would be and what that new government will look like will likely take the rest of the summer to decide. The first issue, of course, was about representation. If there is going to be three branches of government with an executive, judicial, and legislative, how will the people and states be represented in those branches? Well, we already know that larger and smaller states did disagree, but finally settled on the Great Compromise that formed a two-house Congress, which allowed for equal representation in the Senate and proportional representation based on population in the House of Representatives. But now that that issue was settled just a few short days ago, the delegates must decide who will count towards a state's population. Most states do have slaves, but southern states have a much higher population of slaves because their economies depend mostly on slave labor to operate. In the North, states do not have to rely on slave labor because most of the working population are free men and women. This has created a deep divide among southern and northern states, not only on slavery itself, but also representation and taxation in the form of tariffs. Certainly, slavery is probably not going anywhere anytime soon, but it's very important decisions that involve slavery need to be made this summer. Just how will delegates find common ground so that all states are satisfied with the new government structure? We will shortly have an answer soon. Channel 8 sat down with an exclusive interviews with some political analysts this week to get some insight on just how slavery is affecting the convention. Let's take a look.
None of the delegates went to Philadelphia to deal with slavery. They were there to build a government. And they kept coming upon slavery. It kept being relevant to the representation issue, to the regulation of trade, with the slave trade. So they kept bumping into it, and they would have much preferred never to have to talk about it. And when they ran into it, they suddenly found themselves on what James Madison identified quite accurately as the true fault line of American politics at the time between North.
There were many people at the convention, I would say most, the vast majority, who were morally opposed to the institution of slavery. But it was very clear that there would be no union if they tried to abolish the institution in 1787. And so what happened more than slavery disrupting the convention was that there was a tension between North and South all throughout the convention in terms of questions of representation and taxation, particularly because of the slavery issue.
Part of the issue with slavery and some of the issues that the delegates had to deal with were purely economic. Those economic decisions drove their approaches, the delegates' approaches in some ways, to the issue of slavery. In those areas where folks believed that slavery was integral to the particular economy, they protected it, and they protected it fiercely. In those areas where they believed that slavery was less important to the economy, it was less likely to be protected.
Okay, so we are getting word now that an agreement has been reached regarding how populations of states will be counted towards representation in Congress. Very exciting stuff right here live in Independence Hall. Let's turn now to get an up-close look at exactly what the agreement entails. The delegates have agreed on what is being called the 3/5 Compromise, which says that for every 5 slaves in a state, 3 will be counted in the population. This number will help determine how many representatives each state will have in the House of Representatives, and as states pay direct taxes to the national government. This is an interesting agreement, because surely the southern states, who have no interest in giving slaves rights or freedoms of any kind, fought to have their slaves counted towards the population so they can have more representatives in Congress. Northern states, on the other hand, who would like to abolish slavery altogether, have fought to reject slaves as part of the population. So southern states do not have as much voice in Congress. We will continue to follow this story as it continues to break. We are also being told that when it comes to taxation, the agreement has been reached so that Congress does have the power to pass laws that allow them to collect taxes from citizens. And Congress will also have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, among states, and with Native American tribes. Now, an additional agreement has also been reached directly regarding the issue of slavery and the slave trade. Delegates have agreed to postpone dealing with the issue until at least the year 1808. A new clause states that Congress will not have the power to end the Atlantic slave trade until 1808 at the earliest. Well, we knew that slavery probably wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, and that has been confirmed today as these new agreements emerge from the convention. Delegates from North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia apparently threatened to leave the convention if these agreements were not included in the new Constitution. Now, we will certainly be interested in finding out how the rest of the convention turns out. The convention is expected to last through the end of the summer, and stay tuned for the final version of our country's brand new Constitution. I'm Ms. Schaefer. This has been a special report with NEMS Channel 8. See you next time.